Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. A very warm welcome to our channel. This is me, Fateh Singh, and today we are going to talk about a very controversial topic, or either we can say something that is too much into the air right now in terms of Sikh Panth, that is the sacrilege of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. What is sacrilege, why is it happening, and what can be done? We're going to ponder upon some of the views on this topic with we are having today with us Advocate Gurpartap Singh Bhullar ji, who usually deals with the cases of criminals and writ cases in High Court, Punjab High Court. First of all, a very warm welcome to the channel. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Most grateful.
So, before we begin with anything, I would first like to start with this topic itself, that what sacrilege exactly means in terms of this legal perspective.
So as you rightly mentioned, see, sacrilege and any religious crime for that matter, if we talk of anything that is void of a religious view, the proper domain to define it lies within the respective religious denomination, if we view it from the perspective of what is proper. But if we see what is presently available under Indian law, then of course, Sidhu Moosewala has made famous a very important section of the Indian Penal Code, which happens to be section 295A. So this was a section added by the British. The code was again notified in 1860. But this was added later on to prevent communal discord. This section essentially is, you could say, a reference point which includes not only blasphemy, but also sacrilege. Now, if we talk of blasphemy and sacrilege, both are things of a different genus. And the criticism towards 295 essentially has been that it has been misused. For that matter, even Moosewala's song talks of this, that, it's blatantly misused by the executive authorities to bring down enemies of the powers that be, oftentimes. So, it has mostly become a blasphemy law. And whatever the instances of sacrilege that we've seen in the past, they have happened to be, brought in the ambit of 295, which is an incorrect method in my opinion. So, if we talk of sacrilege, from a strictly legal or a rational perspective, that means physical assault or damage to the principal object of worship, which is held sacred. However, if I was to talk about it from the religious perspective, then of course each denomination can describe sacrilege in various means. Whereas, a particular idea or a particular speech or forms of words uttered can also be considered sacrilegious. But talking from the perspective of, a rational perspective, it should primarily include damage to the physical objects of worship, the principal mode of worship, essentially trying to create a sense of fear in the body of practitioners of a particular religion. So unto that end, the Indian law as of date is lacking a definition of sacrilege. And as we've seen in the past, in Punjab, we've had incidents due to some political motivation or some other forms of motivation, where specifically Sri Guru Granth Sahib has been targeted. So here we feel the need that a separate law, a separate definition of sacrilege ought to be drawn out. A separate law has to be made, rather than relying on the ambit of 295A, which has been hitherto, blatantly misused and isn't even befitting the problem we see.
So you talk about sacrilege. I have this question that just because of being more into the community, the Sikh community, we get to know about that sacrilege of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji is happening. What we might say that we see that some angs of Guru Sahib Ji's are somewhere in the streets, and these things can be seen in a very common way as a form of sacrilege. But is it also that other religions are also facing such kind of sacrileges within the country, and what is the ratio of these sacrileges happening in terms of Sikhs and other religions?
See, if we talk of the very recent past, then essentially Punjab happens to be a unique stub. If we see the per capita crime statistics, we rely on the NCRB data. Essentially, Punjab has, you could say, 5 times more instances of sacrilege as compared to other areas. It's not to say that sacrilege doesn't happen in other religions. We have seen in the past also certain mischievous elements in the state of Punjab would, desecrate Hindu places of worship, essentially disfigure idols, etc. And some would, blame it on to, someone of different religion, just to exploit it for political ends. So these instances have been happening. But if we take the case of Punjab in particular, Sri Guru Granth Sahib in particular, this has been a recurring phenomena, not only in the present time since 1947, but even in times of the British era as well. Because, as practicing Sikhs, we know that our strength, be it in all forms, be it strength politically, economically, or even the way we carry out ourselves in life in general, the modicum of weighing everything is the aphorisms of Guru Granth Sahib. What Maharaj tells us, that is the only way we seek inspiration and conduct ourselves in lives. So the powers that were opposed to us, after 1849, especially, the fall of the Sikh Empire, they thought that we should, in some method or the other, bring down the respect that people have or the sanctity people have towards Shri Guru Granth Sahib. Essentially, that is what the British felt in the Anglo-Sikh wars. They saw that the source of strength is the Swarup of Maharaj. So there were attempts made to convert it into any other book of theology, as is in the Abrahamic religions. You had the Christian missionaries in the forms of anthropologists like Ernest Trump, the very famous name, had affiliations with the Protestant denomination. So he went on to translate the Swarup of Maharaj and went on to make statements that, it's not useful to completely translate as it's repetitive, etc. But we see this has been happening in the very beginning. And now of late, it has become, a method of deriving some political merit. Dividing the community in Punjab across religious lines has been alleged upon some, denominations and deras, etc., to have conducted these activities. So we see this is happening lately, especially in the past 4 or 5 years, for some political or some, social motive, be it, proselytization of some other religion, or be it, dividing the Sikh community at large, or disturbing the, situation of communal harmony in the state of Punjab. So now here I feel, if we mention, as you rightly asked me, about the trajectory of sacrilege in the past and the incidents, another area to examine is that why it is happening.
Exactly. There is one question I want to ask you, that what triggers someone to make these things happen? Because it's not just happening with the one community particularly. We see a lot of time Hindu sentiments or other religion sentiments are also being hurt. So is it something that divide and rule kind of analogy is working in a particular area?
Absolutely. The religion is amongst, the most exploited tools in any society. Religious fervor is used across all democracies. Even if you take the case of US, the issue of abortion is a big issue there. It's a religious issue primarily. So again, religious sentiments have been always exploited in our country to the misfortune of our nation. So that has to be remedied, and essentially within that ambit we see the desecration of Guru Granth Sahib. Now if we talk of it from a perspective of an individual who conducts these acts, oftentimes it can be due to religious motivations, trying to proselytize or convert a particular community to a particular religion. So in ways that, we bring down the respect people have for Granth Sahib. Ideally, they wish to bring down the Swarup of Maharaj from object of worship, reverential object of worship, to any ordinary, text on theology. So that is done to, invoke an impassioned response from the Sikh community generally. So with the past instances that we've seen, the reasoning behind it, the motive behind it is again to secure some political or some religious goal, be it aiding conversion or be it, supporting a particular denomination or dera. These have been largely the motivations.
Whatever the reason this sacrilegious thing is happening, the question stands out that if it happens, what are the things that can be done to safeguard the right? First of all, many people, I don't know if they're aware about it, what are rights in terms of these things? How can we safeguard this prestige if we have right to take owner of our spiritual scriptures? What can be done within the state, and if the state itself is responsible for that, how can this thing be safeguarded in a global manner?
See, essentially, there is one distinction we need to draw. Presently as the law exists, the criminal lexicon as it exists in India, 295A has not been in a position to prevent acts of sacrilege. We've had criticism from, the secular and the left-minded groups that, get rid of 295A, it's a blasphemy law that you put in. So here we need to distinguish blasphemy from sacrilege. Blasphemy means that you risk offending a religious value, a religious belief. And in saying so, for example, we have blasphemy laws in Pakistan, we have, in most of the Islamic nations, any comment made towards the Prophet or towards the doctrine of a particular religion is punishable. In a liberal democracy, there should be criticism of religion. It is a sine qua non to have freedom of expression. You can criticize religious ideas. But at the same time, this does not mean you enter places of worship. You do physical harm of the reverential objects of worship in the sanctum sanctorum, be it the Swarup of Maharaj or be it the presiding deity in any temple for that matter. So 295A wholly has been inadequate because it's one provision which seeks to provide punishment for blasphemy as well as sacrilege. So sacrilege requires a distinct definition first of all. So we made that endeavor. We made a draft law for that matter. A draft bill was made and it was sent to the appropriate legislators within the state of Punjab and also all stakeholders, including the Advocate General then and even the concerned secretaries of the state for bringing out appropriate law. It was not so that an endeavor was not made earlier. If we look back in the past, in the times of the government of the Shiromani Akali Dal, when desecration incidents happened, they brought in an amendment to the provision in IPC 295. So they brought it to the level that they provided life imprisonment for Vyadbi of Maharaj Swarup. So again, the problem here was that when you amend a central act, IPC is a central act, you would need to get it vetted. You would need permission for cause of the union government to get it passed. And again, whatever law you make in India, that has to be amenable to fundamental rights, secularism, equality. So again, a question was brought in that, you've just added Granth Sahib. What about the other religions? So without application of mind, I'd say, other holy texts were also brought in. Now here we need to understand that the way a Sikh has reverence for the Sri Guru Granth Sahib's Maharaj Swarup.
They see it as a living God.
Yes. Essentially, that is not the same level of adoration you would expect from other religions. In other religions, you would see there is adoration perhaps for an idol, perhaps for some other object of worship. Essentially, what was required was to create a law. The state has the power under the 7th schedule of the Constitution to bring out a law, state law. Law and order is a state subject in the scheme of the Constitution, to bring out a law where they define sacrilege clearly. And in defining so, they talk of sacrilege as physical harm meted upon the principal object of worship. For the case of the Sikhs, it is, as we all know, Guru Granth Sahib Maharaj presides over the proceedings in the Gurdwara. For our Hindu brothers, it's the presiding deity. In the sanctum sanctorum, the Hindi word is Garbhagriha, right? Similarly, in the sanctum sanctorum of a Gurdwara, it's Guru Granth Sahib. So that ought to be protected rather than, without applying mind, you make laws without thinking about things.
Okay, so talking about the state of Punjab, lately we heard a statement made by the government that we are not supposed to have our shastras over social media. Is it a threat to the religious freedom? Do you see it in terms of legal perception?
Right, so this happened lately that, the government brought out an order that there shall be no display of weapons. They didn't say the word display of weapons, they merely said gun culture. The government said that we should not promote gun culture. So essentially they banned all sorts of songs that were portraying weapons, etc. And they did so by saying that if you violate this, we bring in offences against you under 188 IPC. That is disobeying orders of a public servant, etc. So now this question should be examined by courts of law again. The constitutional courts of our country, the High Court and the Supreme Court. They are guardians of our fundamental rights. Now whether display of weapons or promoting guns, etc., is it restricted under Article 19? That is right to freedom of expression. This question is germane to be examined by the courts of law. Essentially, if it is not creating any law and order problem, it's not creating any harm towards any community, then of course it is not wise to put such restrictions. If you talk of the shastras of a practicing Sikh, we talk of Karpan, right? That is protected within Part 3 of the Constitution. Article 25 protects the wearing and carrying of Karpans by Sikhs. It is a part of the practice, profession and propagation of Sikh religion. So as such, the state cannot impose any limitation, be the central government or the state government, on the carrying of shastras by a baptized Sikh which come in the nomenclature of a crime.
Until and unless it breaks the peace. And
Not really, even not then. If you are talking of the fundamental right, if you are talking of Article 25, 25 gives you the right to carry kirpans. The only reasonable restriction state can impose is public order and offense to morality. Again, if the state does so, remedies lie with each citizen to invoke again provisions under Article 32 and 226 to approach the High Court and the Supreme Court on judging whether this act of imposing restriction is reasonable or not. So in that way, it is not easy to bar the Sikhs from carrying kirpans in the state of India. Essentially, the British did so with the Nihang Jathebandis. They were barred to wear shastras.
Exactly.
But the government of India, realizing the contribution of the Nihang Singhs, Baba Hanuman Singh for that matter,
this had a deep impact. We're still suffering it. That many of the size of the shastra have been just smaller down.
That I would say it's not more so on legal tone, but more so on the tone of the Sikh community itself. We have taken to reduce the size of shastras, and we've somehow imbibed the idea that shastras are not meant to be kept as a spiritual practice. So this is neglect on our part of the Bani of the Sampadsha for that matter.
Talking in terms of legal perception, how can we do something? What can be done now? Fine, sacrileges are happening, why they're happening, we've talked about it. But the question comes here that what can be done if it's happening?
See, essentially, if we talk of the law as of date, the law is inept. It is not in a position to protect sacrilege. Had that been the case, had 295A been adequate, the number of desecrations we are seeing should have gone down. So we need a law. Again, the Punjab Legislative Assembly, the Punjab Vidhan Sabha, has the power to introduce such law, which first of all defines the act of sacrilege, at the same time imposes rigorous punishment for the same, and also provides for a regulatory mechanism where a duty is imposed upon the religious management of a particular Gurdwara or Mandir. Oftentimes we don't see that sacrilege is happening merely out of, because of hatred towards a religion. Sometimes it is done by management of Gurdwaras and Mandirs themselves, so as to, take charge of the management or take charge of the Golak and to bring down the incumbent administration in the said premise. So here a responsibility also ought to be cast on to the respective religious place of worship, that you maintain CCTV recordings of the sanctum sanctorum, and the same is kept in a foolproof manner. Returns are sent to the executive magistrates of the government. A regulatory mechanism is also required. So for that matter, we presented a draft bill to the government, and we wanted the government to bring out a law on this, so that tomorrow, for political reasons or for some personal reasons, exploitation of religious places of worship is not carried out. Essentially, it is the domain of the state to maintain harmony, to maintain, communal harmony in every region and ensure law and order. And this law would just provide for that rather than, leaving it on to the...
Okay, so I have this very last question from you, that if any individual, forget he had this whole sort of technical knowledge about legality and laws and everything, on an individual level, what can he be doing if he feels like that, and he practicing a religion feels like his religion is being threatened or sacrilege is being happening at a very individual level? What can an individual do?
See, talking of any individual whose right to practice a religion is being curtailed by state action, he has the remedy to go to courts of law and file writs to get their problem solved. But if you talk of sacrilege in particular, here we require the community to first of all identify the perpetrators, gather evidence. Again, we need CCTV recordings of the people. Oftentimes what happens is that it is said that, this person was mentally diseased or there was some problem in his mind that he did such act. So here the community needs to be vigilant. They need to observe, they need to also invoke remedies under criminal law wherever required, that, to prove that these people did such things in sane mind and they did with certain misery or certain hate.
So do we have the right to take someone's life in any case? Because we have seen in the past cases that people say that you cannot take somebody's life by taking the name of their religion.
See, again, if you talk of this as the perspective of law, of course you cannot take someone's life. But if someone is attacking you, say, with the intention to kill you, you have the right to defense. You have the right to private defense. Again, and then within that right, you can protect your life and limb. So even for that matter, any attack is being made on a place of worship with the intent to desecrate. So you can use commensurate force to, restrict that. It's like I'll say, if somebody throws a stone at you, you don't have the right to shoot them in the head, of course. You have the right to private defense again to a level which is proportionate to the harm that is being made upon you. So supposedly if someone comes and attacks a place of worship with guns and weapons, you have the right to respond to it proportionately. But again, the onus to prove that you acted in proportion or you acted in pursuit of your right to private defense will be on you. You will have to prove that in a court of law that you acted by means of private defense to protect yourself. So that is again available to everyone, but doesn't graduate to the level that you kill someone or
Is that on a state level or a global level? Both of the aspects are same in terms of law?
Essentially, if you see all common law jurisdictions, that would be the scenario.
Okay.
Right? If we were to say give the liberty to someone to kill someone merely on the pretext that this man is about to cause sacrilege, then there will be blatant misuse of that provision as well.
Okay.
What is required is a strong regulatory mechanism, a strong penal provision, which says that if you commit sacrilege, there is rigorous imprisonment, so that people are deterred from actually thinking about these acts. 295A is merely punishing people for up to 3 years, the offences of a bailable nature, and there is no significant deterrent in the mind of the criminal to proceed with such acts. So there should be deterrence, and the law needs to be harsh and strict in this manner. You define what sacrilege is and make sure that this law doesn't prevent criticism of religion. We don't want to create a blasphemy law, but we want to prevent places of worship being misused by bad elements in creating communal disharmony. So that is the essence of it.
Okay, so that was extremely informative. We have learned a lot from this conversation. Thank you so much for being with us. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Quite a pleasure. Thank you.